Welcome, and thank you so much for joining the World Affairs Council of Connecticut today to discuss the Suez Canal and the fragility of global shipping with Elisabeth Braw. Elisabeth Braw is a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, AEI, where she focuses on defense against emerging national security challenges, such as hybrid and gray zone threats. So hopefully in the future, we might have Elisabeth back to dive into some of those really important and future-focused topics as well. She is a columnist with Foreign Policy, where she writes on national security and the globalized economy. She's also a member of the National Preparedness Commission. So Elisabeth, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We're thrilled to have you with us. To everyone out there, my name is Amanda Jolly, VP of Programs with the World Affairs Council. And with today's structure, we'll kick off with a conversation with Elisabeth Braw and Megan Torrey, CEO of the World Affairs Council of Connecticut. Before we get started, we want to say a huge thank you to our episode sponsor. Today's episode of State of the World is sponsored by Yukon Global. We're so grateful for their support of the series, of the work of the World Affairs Council, and for making urgent community conversations like this possible. So a huge thank you to Yukon Global. So we're honored to have Elisabeth here today to discuss the Suez Canal block and how one disruption, from an accident to a proxy war to a grounding by the ever given, can create consequences that ripple across the world. So let's get started. I'm pleased to turn it over to you, Megan Torrey, CEO of the World Affairs Council.
Welcome, everybody, to State of the World. We're so happy that Elisabeth is joining us today from London with this really timely topic. So let's dive right in. So Elisabeth, recently the world's attention was fixed on what was happening in the Suez Canal with the Ever Given. Can you kind of walk us through what happened?
Yes, well, thank you for having me, for the invitation, Megan, and it's nice to meet you all, even though I can't see you. I can see here that there are already questions coming in. So what happened was that this super freighter carrying around 20,000 containers got stuck in the Suez Canal. And it's, as we all know, it's not a very big canal, it's actually a very narrow canal. And so it takes considerable skill to pilot any ship through it, and especially these super freighters. And we should remember that ships, container ships, have been getting bigger even in just the past 10 years or so. So it used to be that the largest one carried 10,000 containers, and now it's or what's called TEU, so 20-foot equivalent containers. Now it's 20,000. They may even get bigger, so up to 24,000. These are massive ships, and if one of those, especially those really large ones, steers a little bit off course, then there is a risk they get stuck in a very narrow canal like the Suez Canal, which is what happened. And because there are so many ships coming into the world's canals every single day, if one gets stuck, then there is a queue. I mean, it's like a red traffic light with front cars and moving, and that's what happened.
So let's talk about some of the immediate consequences of the block. How did it disrupt global supply chains and all of the other ships that were going in both directions?
Yeah, so within any given 24-hour period, you have more than 50 ships traveling through the Suez Canal. So obviously, if the canal is blocked, then you have 50 times how many days the ship is blocking the canal. You have that number of ships waiting to enter. And so what happened was that you in the end had lots and lots of container ships waiting to enter, but you also had lots of others saying or being told by their shipping companies not to wait around, because we have to remember it was unclear whether it would take 2 days or 6 or 7 days, which is what it was in the end, or months to get the Ever Given unstuck. So several hundred ships decided to take the longer route down by the South African coast and the Cape of Good Hope, and that of course takes much longer. So whether they were waiting or whether they were taking the longer route, it led to delays. And as a result, we still have tens of thousands of tons of goods that haven't arrived where they were supposed to arrive. And I think that illustrates how how perfectly timed shipping is. It's calculated to arrive at just the right time where the recipient needs it and can transport it on the receiving party, which will then transport it on to the end customer, which may be a company, and then eventually people like you and me, if it's not a retailer. So all of this is minutely organized, and it works perfectly as long as there isn't a disruption. And in this case, it was a sort of a benign disruption, you might call it, because it was just caused by human error. But if you think about what else could go wrong, it's quite frightening, actually.
We know that some of the ships that were sort of waiting behind were carrying live animals and livestock, right? Which poses a threat for them. Do we have any idea what was on the Ever Given? I've read, maybe some men's clothes, some ginger. Do we know? We know it was on its way to Rotterdam. Do we know what was on it?
Oh, it was basically anything you can imagine that can be transported. Auto parts, it was furniture, it was live animals, as you said, up to 200,000 live animals. And it's still unclear how many of those survived. Obviously, they were transported to be slaughtered eventually, but you would hope that they would have a somewhat less painful death being slaughtered in a slaughterhouse than suffocating or starving to death on a ship that's stuck waiting to travel through the Suez Canal. So that's really heartbreaking. And then so all the way from auto parts and live animals to furniture and beer, lots of beer apparently, and clothing. Basically anything we need for our daily lives goes into these containers.
So that really highlights and illuminates the broader issue of the fragility of our global shipping infrastructure. So you wrote in the foreign policy article, the Ever Given's unintended blockade of the narrow canal has caused a profoundly sea-blind global public to take sudden interest in global shipping. Though the ship has now been freed and the issue resolved, what lesson does the world need to take away from this event? I know so many of us don't think about how our goods get to us. What can we learn from this blockade?
But we should learn not to take deliveries for granted. So it's so easy to say, oh, I ordered this on Amazon or whichever firm you like to use, and I ordered, super quick delivery. And yeah, that's fine, but we should think about all the people involved in getting the product that you'd like to have within hours or maybe days, all the people involved in getting it to you. And that starts with the people involved in making it. So let's say you order a pair of shoes. That pair of shoes may travel between several countries as it's being made, because it's not a shoemaker making it in his sort of home factory anymore. It's a global supply chain even making those shoes, and they may travel between several countries. Then they travel to the country where those shoes will be sold, possibly, in which case you may order it from your local shoe shop, or if you order it online, you can order it from another country. Regardless, at some point it arrives. Those shoes arrive in a ship, and then they have to be transported somewhere near you, and then the end, so the final mile, as it's called, is taken care of by a delivery guy, right? And all of this has to work. And then so it's easy to get angry and say, well, my shoes were an hour late, but actually the fact that all of this works most of the time is a miracle. And the reason that it works, or the reason that we use it so much, is that it works so well. But I think if there is anything we should learn, is that we shouldn't take for granted that it works well. We should also think about all the people involved in making that happen, in sort of delivering all these goods to us that we have become so used to just having delivered to us. And we should remember that each of those steps, if one step doesn't work, then we don't receive our goods.
So yeah, let's talk about the magnitude of global shipping. For those who might not know, how much trade and commerce passes through global waterways and relies on maritime shipping.
Yeah, so it's massive. So we can just think about Maersk, which is a Danish company that's the world's largest container shipping company. It has 600 of these really enormous vessels that travel the world's oceans every single day. So every 15 minutes, a Maersk ship docks somewhere. and they carry up to 20,000 of these containers that contain every conceivable good. In 2017, Maersk was struck by a cyber attack that originated in Russia. It was a Russian attack against Ukraine, and then this virus traveled on. It's called NotPetya. It was called NotPetya, and then traveled on and struck Maersk and other global companies, including Mondelez, which is based in Illinois, Merck, and others. Anyway, I think that the worst damage that it did was hitting Maersk, because Maersk's IT network went completely dark, which meant that those 600 ships couldn't go anywhere. And so you had all these sort of journeys involving 20,000 containers each time that couldn't happen. Just to give you an example and this is just one snapshot, one port, that's the port of Rotterdam, which is one of the largest ports in Europe, but it's not one of the 10 largest in the world, because those are all in Asia, and there's one in the UAE. So here today in Rotterdam, 24 ships are still arriving, and so it's now 6:15 in Rotterdam. 34 ships will still arrive. There are 115 already docked, and 175 have departed already today. So that's you can calculate that per hour. So that's somebody can do the maths quickly, but it's a lot of ships every single hour. And let me just give you another figure here. It's from the port of Los Angeles, which is one of the world's 20 largest, not one of the 10 largest, one of the 20 largest. Last year, it processed 800,000 TEUs, so shipping containers, 800,000. That's an enormous figure. So if you divide that by 20,000, which is the largest ships today, that's so 800,000 divided by 20,000, that's what, 400, I think. So 400 of these ships every single, well, last year. So it's enormous quantities. And as I said, the arriving and departing is just one aspect. It's also what do these ships do while they are traveling? What sort of vulnerabilities are there while they are traveling the world seas? That's something that concerns me. And so all of this means my point is that there are vulnerabilities every step of the way that we don't see because we're land dwellers and we just click somewhere and think that it's going to arrive without any problems.
We'll talk about some technical vulnerabilities in a minute, but if I understand it correctly, only about 12% of maritime shipping goes through the Suez Canal. Are there other geographical choke points that make shipping vulnerability? And I know that Admiral Stavridis just recently published something in Time that spoke to his idea of what maybe some of those geographical vulnerabilities would be. But from your perspective, where are some of the other choke points?
Yeah, so the world's canals are obviously choke points because they can't be made much wider. Obviously, the Suez Canal has been made a bit wider, but I mean you can't change geography. So those are choke points. But there are also ports. If you were a hostile country, for example, and you wanted to cause damage, you would certainly try to disrupt port operations. I mean, if we think about sorry, I'm focusing on the port of Rotterdam, but it has a fantastic information every single day. So if a hostile country were to try something with the port of Rotterdam, more than 300 ships coming and going today or still being docked, you can cause huge damage. So with every given, we are talking about one ship, and with a port, we are talking about hundreds that you could essentially affect at the same time, because even if you just manage to disrupt the operations of the ones or the operations in the port itself, that means that all those ships waiting to come in can't come in, and we get every given disruptions multiplied many times over. So ports are something I worry about, and I would also I mean not to be too I don't want to sort of stretch the point too far, but if you think about people working in ports, I mean, if you were a hostile country, you could essentially incentivize port workers not to turn up for work, and we would be stuck because we depend on them. We can't do anything without them. Obviously, today we don't have the people sort of carrying the cargo on their backs the way it used to be in the past. Instead, they sit in they're essentially lift operators. But without them, we are stuck.
So as a result, we know that this big delay, was a really big deal. And a lot of shipping companies don't have necessarily delay insurance, right? Do you think that sort of shipping insurance is now going to become more costly? And will that impact the price in the distribution of goods?
Yeah, so insurance is one of those subjects that nobody likes to talk about because it's so boring, and it's every time somebody sort of thinks about insurance, it's about home insurance. Oh yeah, I should take care of it, or car insurance, what have you, and it's just a pain, and nobody wants to think about it. And equally, how many people worry about shipping insurance? Nobody. But it's just like you can't drive a car without having car insurance. These ships can't travel without insurance, and there are different kinds of insurance, obviously, for different sort of things that could happen. And because delays are so rare, most of them, turns out that they didn't have delay insurance, because usually delays are only so far have only been caused by the ship or the crew itself. And if you're well equipped and do what you need to do, then you wouldn't have any delays. But this again demonstrates that delays can be caused by lots of other things that have nothing to do with the crew itself, or anything involving the company that's actually operating the ship. So that's one aspect. Then I don't know how many people on this call remember the Stena Impero incident in the Strait of Hormuz. I think it was 2 years ago. So it was a Swedish ship flying under UK flag with a crew consisting of Russians, Indians, and I think a Latvian guy. It was seized by the Iranian authorities on they alleged some sort of mistake or infraction by the crew, but it was seized and held for a number of weeks. As a result of that, shipping insurance went up, because obviously insurers are thinking about, what do we do if we get these sort of delays, and obviously we have to recover our costs, because the insurer pays if something goes wrong. So these are, it sounds really boring, but without insurance, we can't really do anything, because nobody will dare to operate or to drive a car or to steer a ship through the world's oceans without the peace of mind that comes with having insurance.
The fragility of global shipping is extremely clear. But another thing that you've outlined are threats to global shipping infrastructure that sort of go under the radar. Let's talk a little bit about these. And one of them I want you to talk about is proxy wars. It's a very specific threat that can be used as a tool. Can you explain the threat of proxy wars in shipping, and maybe give us an example of how this could play out on the global stage?
Yeah, so proxy wars are really just a term for when governments, when they try to harm another country, but not doing so themselves, but by using another sort of entity. So it can be, proxies can be hackers, so they're freelancing for that particular government. It can also be militia groups. It can be basically anybody that government commissions to do the work on its behalf. And that's, I think, also really something that we should be concerned about in shipping, because you could have groups essentially targeting civilian shipping, which we have to remember is it's completely unprotected. You have the right to sail through the world's waters without being attacked, but there is no navy big enough that can protect every single commercial vessel out there. So they are on their own, and they sort of rely on everybody to follow the rules, which again opens the opportunity for these proxy groups working on behalf of another government to disrupt, to destroy, or otherwise harm this civilian shipping. And so, for example, we have seen Iranian vessels there was an explosion on one the other day, and there was a missile attack on another one, and so nobody knows really what that's all about or who did it, and nobody has claimed responsibility. But it again demonstrates how really civilian ships are sitting ducks, and as I said, not even the US Navy is big enough to patrol around everywhere to accompany every single vessel. So that's something we should be concerned about. Another thing I think should be highlighted is the risk of misnavigation or GPS spoofing. I don't know if you wanted to come to that later, but it's incredibly important.
Yeah, so I was actually going to ask you about spoofing next, and it's just ironic. We had a program last night on space defense, right? And spoofing is included in that. So can you talk a little bit about spoofing, what it is, and how hostile nations or non-state actors can deploy this approach, and specifically when it comes to international shipping?
Yeah, so in past, I was going to say generations, but in past centuries, seafarers relied on obviously on celestial navigation, and they oriented themselves following the stars and the sun, which incidentally is why so many sailors had an eye patch, right? Because they had been staring into the sun. It's not that they had been in some sort of battle. It's because they had been staring into the sun with a looking glass. But so that's the past. Then came GPS, and everything became much easier because GPS is perfect. You can navigate with much greater precision. But of course, the moment you're dependent on technology, you're also making yourself vulnerable to somebody messing with that technology, and that's what has been happening. And so all seafarers, or captains, I should say, and sort of the officer class of seafarers, they all know how to use the traditional instruments in celestial navigation. So it's not like they would end up like Christopher Columbus. They wouldn't end up in America if they were trying to go to India or something like that. So they are very good at navigating with these traditional tools. GPS helps them navigate with fantastic precision. But if somebody messes with the GPS, they are likely to know, they are guaranteed to notice it because, as I said, they know how to use traditional instruments, and they wouldn't end up on a completely different continent or a completely different ocean. But it's enough that they end up just slightly off where they were intending to be. And all of a sudden they could be in another country's territorial waters. And that country could then sort of claim that you have strayed into our waters without permission, and now we are seizing your vessel, which seems to have been the case with, as it happens with Estena Impero. It did apparently stray into the wrong side of where it was going to be, and that seems to have been the result of GPS. So you can imagine, let's say, if China wanted to play a really dirty game, it could mess with the GPS of civilian vessels traveling near Chinese territorial waters, and then claim that, oh, yeah, you're in the wrong place, and now we're going to seize your vessels because you don't have permission to be here. So if you wanted to disrupt shipping, the space is wide open for all sorts of nastiness.
So sort of a global shipping cyber attack, if you will. Absolutely. So I want to bring in a few questions from the audience. I know that we're starting to run short on time, but there's a question about the sustainability of shipping, right? So we know that in 2018 is when the Ever Given was built. And at the time, it was one of the largest ships. And since then, there have been even bigger ships, and the demand for shipping continues to grow. Is this a sustainable solution to address global shipping? Will the world need to look at other solutions to carry shipments abroad, or do you think that eventually we'll see people looking to manufacture goods closer in geography to where they are?
Yeah, I mean, we are already seeing the development towards even larger vessels, but it's clear why shipping companies are going in this direction, because the margins in shipping are so small that you need that sort of volume in order to make any money on your shipping, and so it's logical from that point of view. But the point is that, and I think this relates not just to 20,000 TEU vessels, but shipping in general. Do we really need all these goods to be brought to us from other countries? It creates this really as we have discussed, vulnerable supply chain. It also relies on people, lots of people from poorer countries who may in 5 or 10 years time not be willing or able to do this work anymore. And it also relies on people, again, in poorer countries to make the goods for us, just to, and all of this has to be done very cheaply so that we can get the goods more cheaply than if they were manufactured in the US or the UK or what have you. I think that the most sustainable solution is to buy more local. And obviously that the pressure would have to come from consumers for manufacturers to say, okay, I'm going to shift my supply chain and reduce its exposure or its reliance on foreign components, and then I will do as much of it as I can here in the US or whatever the country may be. But I can't see how it can be sustainable to ship items, components, completed goods several times around the globe until they reach us, and still less expensive than they would have been if they were manufactured right in our home countries.
So we're running out of time, and so I want to give you an opportunity to sort of end with the broader picture. You know, what are the biggest lessons we can learn from what happened? What should some of the takeaways be from this incident with the Ever Given? What do we need to know about those that work on the seas? What do we need to know about our goods? What do we all need to take away?
Yeah, I think we should try to cure our sea blindness, and that's something we can do individually. That doesn't sort of involve any government action. We can think about where the goods come from that we consume, and we can say, well, do I really need to buy? And then it says on the product where it was made, and that's just end country. Very likely before that has been through several other countries through this supply chain. But I think we should develop more consumer awareness and say, you know, do I need to buy this product that has at the very least been assembled in another country? Or and do I need to buy fruit from another country? Obviously, the US is well set up with fruit from all parts of the US, but still a lot of fruit is important. Do we really need that? And I think buying more local is better for ourselves because it's you know what you get. It's also better for the people in those countries. Obviously, they may lose some of that production, but they also won't be under that enormous pressure to make cheap goods, and they may be able to make more sort of higher quality goods. And lastly, we wouldn't put as much pressure on our oceans and our ports, which if this continues, our ports will have to expand even more, and so we would end up. I don't know which cities would have those sort of resources to expand the ports even, or which ports would have the resources to expand even more. So it's too cheap. Let's focus on quality rather than price.
Elisabeth, thank you so much for joining us on State of the World today. We have a ton of questions that I didn't get to, and sorry to all of those, but we'll have to invite Elisabeth back again, and I'm looking forward to that.
And Megan, to echo, thank you so much, Elisabeth, for speaking with us today. I also would like to once more acknowledge our sponsor for today's episode, Yukon Global. Thank you so much for making this event possible. And to everyone joining us, thank you so much for being a part of this discussion today. This discussion is an event of the Council's State of the World series. So coming up, we invite you to join us. We'll tackle everything from US-China competition in strategic domains, which is another area that Elisabeth is an expert in too, and a young professional event on sports diplomacy. We'll tackle crises that are upcoming in the Horn of Africa in 2021. And a discussion that this period in time might just be the storm before the calm, geopolitically speaking. So we invite you to join us next week when we'll discuss how civil rights has always been a global movement. And to make sure that you don't miss an episode, you can visit our website at ctwac.org. We invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find this event, all past events, and upcoming events as well. That channel is World Affairs Council of Connecticut, and you can subscribe to the State of the World podcast wherever you get your podcasts. So if you'd like to revisit this conversation, it will be up on Monday. So if you subscribe today, you can get notified when this episode is live. So once again, I just want to thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Fantastic questions. It was great to host this. And most of all, thank you so much, Elisabeth, for sharing your leadership with our community and for being with us today. With that, until next time.